Hey, I'm Charles Soule. You're watching SuperWonder Legacy.
Hey, this is Jason J. Lewis, Superman from Justice League Action, and you're watching SuperWonder Legacy.
You're strong.
I know.
Are you a sight for sore eyes?
It's nice to have someone who likes you for being you.
It's okay. I've got you now.
Just like in the movies.
Welcome to SuperWonder Legacy. I am Jared. I am here with Britt. What's up, Britt?
Hello.
And today we are discussing Barry Allen and Iris West. And so this is one of DC's, again, we keep talking about classic DC couples that in many ways are better than Superman and Lois, but that's not really a high bar, right?
Nope.
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted to do this couple is because in many ways a lot of people think that like we just hate the superhuman with the for lack of a better term, human love interest, because I don't even like the term human love interest. I think it's really horrible.
It's actually civilian. You just say civilian.
Yes, civilian love interest is better. So so that's kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted to prove that, like, hey, there's better ways to do it, and that's why it's like we do these couples comparisons, because Britt and I are like, there are so many better ways that they could do this. But
right.
Yeah,
also the thing is, I mean, if you jump to the conclusion that just because we support SuperWonder, that means not liking this civilian hero relationships, then that's on whoever thinks that. Because I mean, I don't know how you can jump to that conclusion, but in a sense, in modern times, I mean, it's okay to have those traditional relationships where the hero is still, wanting to save the romantic interest and all of that. That's totally fine. That is one of the pillars of superhero comics, whatever, or just overall stories. But in modern times, especially for female characters, you want the female character to feel like, or to be actually independent from the male character, and that she is her own, she has her own story. And the thing is, you have a lot of talking and, what Lois is, but at the same time, we don't actually see her as independent.
yeah, and even when they give her own superpowers, she's just a derivative of Superman.
Right. I mean, I actually saw a tweet the other day, and it's kind of like, okay, so you're shading your favorite character, but from a Lois fan, and she's like, well, her only relevance is being the love interest, the wife, and
Yeah.
Dawn's mom. And it's like, well, I mean, that's
If,
kind
if
of what
only if only there was another love interest option for Superman that has her own book, even though it's dog crap right now, but that stands on her own as a superhero. That would be certainly a wonderful thing, right?
Right, but it's not even about being a love interest, because
Mhm.
that's the thing. It feels like it's
Yeah.
reducing the female character to the love interest. It's not that. It's just, why is it that Lois's only relevancy and how she is able to be at the forefront of stories or have stories is if she is romantically linked to Superman?
Yeah,
That's the big
exactly.
problem.
Exactly. That is a definite problem, because it's like that's the funny part about whenever anyone says that like Wonder Woman was reduced to Superman's girlfriend, and I'm like, are you sure you're not talking about Lois? Because they always bring up, oh, there was that series that she had that went on for like 90 issues, and I go, oh yeah, what was the name of that series?
I mean, it was called Superman's Girlfriend, and also the basic premise, the point of that story, I mean, of that series, was for her to get into some wacky shenanigans in order for Superman to marry her, or to basically treat other female characters, or throw them under the bus to show that Lois is the love interest. But of course, um, that was seen as Silver Age shenanigans and very sexist at the time, very misogynistic. But you see, as we talk about the revisionisms of DC and the fandom. So you have a lot of fans now praising that book and taking lightly of the stories being told. But no, if you have editors actually saying, well, because of the title, they have to have this story where Lana is being thrown under the bus. Honestly, that's not a genuine story to me
Well,
because
yeah.
you
The other
are
thing, yeah. No, go ahead.
because you are, purposefully and forcibly trying to, crap on this other character, crap on the relationship in order to boost up another. If you have to do all of that
Exactly what I was gonna
just
say.
to make this relationship work, just to make Lois the prominent love interest, then honestly, it's just built on shaky ground.
Yeah,
And
and not only that, it's like
Mhm.
remember how many times they try to make Lois relevant by like turning her into Perry White and now Timu Wonder Woman. I always say if you have to keep turning her into other characters to make her relevant, there is a massive issue here.
Yeah, I mean, to say that, oh, um she became Superwoman because they didn't know what to do with her. Um and they have been contemplating making her Superwoman since Dark Crisis.
Oh, yeah, and you could kind
Um
of tell it, and I'm like, yeah, but so if you wanted him to be with someone he didn't have to save, and then they could save the world together, if only Charles Soule had written that
yeah,
book.
or to
Hmm.
say, you are giving her powers to fully understand Clark. If they have been, married or whatever in this continuity for since the 90s, and they have a child and everything like that, wouldn't it be that Lois understands him? Why does it take her needing powers at this old age, basically, in order for
By
her
the
to
way,
finally understand him?
not the first time she's gotten powers.
Yeah, but again, it's that doesn't exist. Post crisis of what it was,
No, it wasn't post
and
crisis.
even Mhm.
It wasn't post crisis where she got powers.
I know I'm saying post
Hmm.
crisis is where they kind of like made her to it was a pre-crisis thing, but I'm just saying post-crisis with the fact that they were married though.
Oh,
um
yeah, exactly.
so yeah, you have this, and it's just very contradictory, um because you're not making the relationship seem in a good light. With that, you're trying to romanticize and gloss over problems, that, I mean, quite honestly, even with Lois having the powers, we see that Williamson did not really do anything. He didn't, he wanted to have like Dan Moore's art, try to have them in this way, but Clark was drawn like Bruce, and Lois kind of looked like Selena and Diana at the same time. Um, just the whole Superwoman, Superman thing, it looked, they kind of looked like siblings and the twins or whatever that, they claim Superwonder to be.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it really just didn't work. And especially even with Clark, the issue where Clark is saying that now he can do everything that he wanted to do, like go to the moon, go to different worlds and do all of this, with her. But when it came down to actually having those talks, those emotional talks about what he's going through as a hero, all she had to say was, "Oh, wow, that's dark." But she didn't have a true perspective, of that world. And we still don't see that. Even in Philip Kennedy Johnson's, when he was on, Superman or Action Comics or whatever.
I think he
But
was on Action, if I want to say.
okay, so when he was beginning, the War World arc, he had Lois, in the fortress, and she was looking at Kryptonian history and I guess writing a book or whatever. But it's always her writing a book, and it's only like the beginning of the story or maybe like one page reference, but she never finishes or it's never really a plot line that they fully commit to. It's always, it feels like something that they're trying to make happen of her actually caring and understanding, you know, Kryptonian heritage, but it's not genuine. How just because you're saying, oh, she's trying to study it or she's writing a book, but we never see that actually come into fruition and executed or anything like that to be a genuine thing. I mean, even John, you don't see John actually um, understanding his Kryptonian heritage either. It's just about the powers. It's not about the true nature of who you are
Exactly.
as a half Kryptonian, half you know mortal being, and even with Clark, the only thing really about Clark is being Clark Kent. It's
Yeah.
never Cal. No one calls him Cal. Even Diana, they've moved away pretty much from her calling him that, and only a rarity because they it's like they want to sever who he is to make it simpler for Lois and this whole Americana, type persona that
And
they
we'll talk
want to
about
portray.
that. We'll talk about that later in the stream. So now we get to Flash and Iris, which with Flash and Iris, it's another example of a couple doing something that DC keeps saying, because in many ways, I would say that Iris does ground Barry, but the difference is Barry's also a human.
Exactly. And I think that's also why this seems a little bit more tolerable
Mm-hmm.
or so, because or more honest,
Because it's not
because
more,
Barry.
it's not like, oh, she makes him human.
Exactly. And and it's actually unfair, to say that, oh, it's okay for Barry to be shipped with, yes, Iris is his prominent love interest, but he can, in pre-crisis, he was with Zatanna, or in Rebirth, they were trying to make Jessica Cruz a thing, you know, but it was okay, because he was still a human or mortal, at the beginning. But if it is someone that is actually labeled as a foreigner, like Clark and Diana, then it's a problem that they have to be linked to a mortal love interest in order to have that sort of humanity, to validate their humanity.
Yeah. Oh, and also Anthony, we did talk about Oliver and Dinah and Bruce and Selena. It's part of our backlog. And Cameron says, and what's up, Cameron? Barry and Iris were also dating, and even in some continuities, married long before he was the Flash. Yeah, it's not like they met because he like saved her from being being a superhero. In fact, actually, the way the post-crisis origin is like he was on, I think he was like, they had known each other because she's a journalist and he's a crime scene person. They made a date to go out and do something, and then he got struck by lightning.
Right. And
So
yeah,
it's kind
it
of
is
cool.
crazy that um a lot of these other pairings were together, before the powers, or they know of each other's secret identities or things like that. It just seems far more genuine when Lois and Clark actually, had that back and forth thing, that more antagonistic relationship. Even if she was in Action Comics, one as course fans always want to bring up, she wasn't particularly a love interest in that way. It was her, as I said, being antagonistic, Clark, yes, he was that self-inserted um boy fantasy of Lois being the girl and the nerd or whatever wanting to get the girl's attention. But again, it wasn't a start of a healthy relationship.
Nope.
And it was only in the 70s, the Bronze Age, when they wanted Lois to be kinder, quote unquote, to Clark in order for her to be acceptable as a love interest, or for her to not have that whole gag thing of her being um, deceived by his secret identity, So honestly, a lot of their relationship, Lois and Clark, is is a lot of retconning, a lot of revisionist history, you rewrites in order to make it work. While Barry and Iris or any other relationship in that context of civilian and hero, they actually have that natural and healthy partnership before the powers or even during the powers. So yeah, that is kind of why it's more tolerable. I don't really read Flash, knowing of the relationship, and even in the Tomorrowverse was really the first time I actually paid attention to Barry and Iris. And it's like, yeah, that relationship, you can feel the genuineness of it.
Yeah. So then we get to the core relationship comparison. And like I said, it's like Barry and Iris are regular human beings. Regular, I hesitate to use that term, but it's more of like actually when you can think about it as well, if you actually apply it, Wonder Woman does ground Superman. It's just you and I have a much different definition of grounding than people on Twitter, because it's like grounding could be embracing all that you are instead of like ignoring one component of your identity. Whereas with Wonder Woman, it's all about being your true self. And then with Superman, Wonder Woman encourages him to also embrace being Superman. Whereas with this one, with Barry and Iris, it's more of like, because the way I kind of see it, whenever I've read Flash, one of my issues one of the problems that he deals with is constantly like slowing down, rushing, obviously because of who he is. And Iris is always there to like calm him down, to like say, no, take it slow, think about it this way.
Right. You want a relationship that it's not grounding or anything as if you're going to turn into a tyrant in seconds, when you're having a bad day. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing about, again, the close relationship is that is the go-to thing. Clark needs humbling. He needs that grounding in order not to become a tyrant or not to distance himself from humanity and just become a Kryptonian. But again, that sounds so xenophobic. It sounds like, in order for him to be accepted by this certain group, society, or whatever, he has to be linked to Lois. He has to be, acceptable to her too. And that's just not right at all. And with Diana, yeah, her grounding, quote unquote, is just her being truthful. And it's having Clark be in his truth, all of his truth as well. With the thing about Diana and even Steve. Steve is, first of all, we hate Steve, of course, but seeing how Diana's entire character has been just, I don't even know what word could describe it because it would be an understatement. But just the whole thing about King's, story and trying to make Steve relevant at the expense of Diana it shows how, again, in modern times, things has changed. And honestly, Perez was a step ahead with Diana. She didn't need Steve. Um, and he was better as that father figure, big brother type, in her stories. But having him as a love interest and trying to make it seem like Diana, being from an island of only women, or labeling it as a foreign island that isn't accustomed to man's world, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
make it seem like the Amazons are just really barbaric, and her only thing is, well, she needs this average American dude to humble her, to show her the way of love. That was never Wonder Woman. That was never Diana, because she is the embodiment of nature, of life, and of culture. So
Yeah.
yeah, again, it just all depends on how you treat these relationships. You don't have to go beyond to make the civilian love interests relevant. If they have a compelling story of their own, or if it's truly a benefit of, well, the story in general and of the main character, then you don't have to jump through hoops and do all of this, or even at the expense of the main character, to make them relevant. And that is DC's biggest issue, especially with Lois and Steve.
Yeah, exactly. And then John says, forcing Steve to be relevant just shows exactly why he shouldn't be relevant. And that's the thing,
Right.
forcing, because he can exist as like a side character, as we saw in like Post Crisis with like Perez and stuff. But the idea that like he has to be the love interest for Wonder Woman is just, honestly, it is boring. And all these people that say that, like, oh, Diana with Clark is just boring. And I'm like, so is him with Lois, because we know they're never going to let him fail to save her. And then you deal with Steve, who is the biggest irrelevant, like, he stands out like a sore thumb. Like, why are you here in her world of gods? And they'll say, oh, to ground her and ground her to humanity. And I'm like, Wonder Woman doesn't need grounding to people of Earth. She's literally an Earth woman.
Yeah, they definitely forget that the Amazons are Earth women. They really think
Diana
that
more so.
if you aren't from America, and if you don't have a certain skin tone, that you are not human, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So then, so the other thing is so then we continue to the other thing about Barry and Iris is like they do have, because Barry involves lots of time travel, like with Flashpoint. And when he came back after Flashpoint, like in the New 52 Earth, they weren't together because that was one of the prices of screwing with the timeline. And it's like he essentially had to win Iris back, which is kind of interesting when you consider the fact that Barry still remembered the old timeline.
I mean, quite honestly, that would really be an emotional toll, to have those memories. Um, but yeah, that was a constant that I saw, that Barry um was this, let me see. I would say he is definitely, or maybe it was just New 52 and Flashpoint, but it feels like he is the center of, the DC universe, with um the Speed Force and time.
Well,
You know,
what they tried to do, they tried to make Wally the central part of DC with Rebirth, and that obviously failed because, ironically, a Tom King story with a Heroes in Crisis. But it's like, yeah, they keep trying to make him the center point. Well, I mean, if ever there was one that works as a chronicler, like when they did the new history of the DC universe, what's kind of interesting about it is it's like when they said that like it's gonna be from the perspective of Barry, I'm like, well, he's done time travel stuff, so you know what? That actually works really well. I like that.
Yeah, and Barry, I mean, he was the central Flash in pre-crisis, and with going on through that, it just felt like he is the Flash. It wasn't just DCEU synergy, it wasn't just from New 52. Even though Wally was, known, it feels like he's more aligned, and even now with the Titans, or just it I don't know, it just feels like at a certain time point, I would say he was at the center as, you know, um, I think with Mark Wade, writing the book in
Mm-hmm.
post crisis. But yeah, it just feels like Barry is that central Flash for DC's timeline continuity.
I would
But
say so.
it as screwed up as it is, it and it really is backwards because Barry created with the new 52 a new timeline. As still it was screwed up and everything because of the the meta, part of it with editorial. But when trying to reverse it back and bring back Wally, it just seemed like everything screwed up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know,
Well, yeah.
um,
Time
and
travel.
yeah, so I don't know. I just think that um maybe, yeah, because of New 52 and knowing that throughout other media, Barry has been, the main Flash. I honestly prefer Barry.
Oh yeah, when I prefer Barry too as as the Flash. The resistance to that is now, to be fair, what had happened was, and we'll get into this later. So he dies in Crisis, and then Wally was the Flash for like decades, honestly, from the 80s all the way until Final Crisis in '09, I think. And he was also in the Justice League cartoon. That was Wally. And it's like, so you had a bunch of fans raised on Wally. So then Jeff Johns brought him back in formally brought him back in Flash Rebirth. And I don't mean DC Rebirth. I mean the storyline Flash Rebirth. And that was when people were like, "Oh, come on, you're replacing Wally." So it's like that's why you have some like things. But if there's ever a character that I think really like works as the centerpiece of DC, it is Barry. So then we get to the key differences. Now, obviously, again, Wally and Barry are human stuff. By the way, I'm going to come out and come back in. I'm having camera issues, but Britt, you go ahead and talk.
Okay, yeah. So the differences, of course, Clark and Diana are born with their powers, um, and they are seen as, you know, these foreigners who at first doesn't understand how the world works, which
Mhm.
is, very, again, a xenophobic, shallow assessment of their characters because everyone grows up differently,
Mhm.
uniquely. And we are all in different states, different countries, and we come together, you know, um, in certain ways. And we also have a different and unique background. So for the most inspirational, aspirational characters, these, prominent guides to have their stories um, relegated to basically saying that if you are different, that's bad. um,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
exactly.
you basically have to sever your ties from your culture, from your uniqueness, because that scares people. And you are supposed to revolve around other people's comfort.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, Cameron says that's what we call consequences. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, but it's like with Barry and Iris, it's like they do have the other difference is like, yeah, as we said before, it's like it's really been Barry and Iris throughout really the publication. I mean, Barry doesn't really date other people. I mean, he dated Jessica Cruz during Rebirth, and I'm like, I kind of see what they're going with, but as a fan of Jessica, I just don't really dig it. But it's really just been Iris West. It's many ways. It's like with Hal Jordan, how he's dated other people before, but it's always come back down to Carol. It's the same thing with this. And whereas with Superman and Wonder Woman, obviously, when they actually allow the relationship to be cultivated, obviously it works out pretty well. But when DC plays DC, particularly during the Rebirth era, and is petty, we get like really, really, really like petty storylines.
And what has that done for them?
Yeah, the sales were really doing not that good. Look at
Right.
how Rebirth is forgotten.
Yeah, I think a lot of the fans, though, from that era, especially, well, I take that back. A lot of people have, turned on Rebirth. And honestly, the only fandom that's really hanging on, I would say, is the Wonder Woman fandom. But,
And Green Lantern.
well, I don't know. But um, I think the Superman fans aren't particularly holding on to, like, not so much of that, but I think it's really just the Super Sons aspect of it,
Yeah,
and
and they
Young
won't
John.
go away with that. By the way, Sean says Rebirth is barely even talked about. Meanwhile, the new 52 lives in people's heads rent free. That's the other thing. I see every day people crapping on the new 52, and I'm like, you realize that if you want people to move on from the new 52, you first. It's like the people that say move on from Zack Snyder's movies. You first.
Well, I mean, they're always bored, so they have to talk about things,
Well, and
talk
they never
about.
will move on because you know why? New 52 brings clicks. Rebirth doesn't, except when you're crapping on it. And I discovered that firsthand. Isn't that kind of funny how that ends, how that works out, Britt? Isn't that kind of funny?
Well, yes, negativity gets a lot of attention.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get to, they also get to integrate this supporting cast because obviously every superhero has great supporting cast. And I think actually, I think it was Rob Liefeld or someone else recently said the problem with modern comics is that they abandon the supporting cast. I mean, look at with Wonder Woman, Britt. The only supporting cast they keep around is the perpetual sad sack they keep trying to make into a like pairing for Wonder Woman. We don't have Julia. Vanessa's been turned into a villain, and it's like, or like someone that's weirdly obsessed with Diana, who is in effect her sister. Screw you, Tom King. And the only like supporting characters that you really see a lot of in Superman are Lois, Perry, and Jimmy, but that's it. At least with Flash, you can't. They don't really let you ignore him because with Flash, like everyone loves like the entire Flash family.
Yeah, I mean, Superman is very much stuck with the Daily Planet cast, and I mean that's essential if they would also honor Clark as a journalist, but they don't. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's very much a backdrop, and it's honestly only a thing because he's married to Lois. If anything, if Clark was a global hero and on his own, you would rarely see the Daily Planet as you do now. Perry is the mayor, so he's not even really brought up. Jimmy, I think Jimmy's, recent appearances were really because of the synergy with, the Superman 2025 movie. but he is irrelevant. Um, Lois, she's there as the love interest, but even at times she's forgotten and put in the background. With Wonder Woman, I mean, you always have these writers where they think that they know better for her and want to leave their mark, want to, you know, she's the character that they feel like they can self-insert with. So their OCs and everything like that, they will force them in, like Trinity, um, even Rucka, from his post-crisis run. He created the whole embassy, which is nice, to have Diana as an ambassador. We love that aspect. But who really cared about the embassy staff? You know, it really wasn't as compelling,
I
you
feel
know.
like I feel like Rucka was trying to give her her own Daily Planet staff.
But I mean,
But Britt, that lies the problem. The problem with like the way a lot of people treat Wonder Woman, whether it's Trinity with the whole because Batman and Superman have kids, or the embassy staff just being the Daily Planet staff, you're just giving her her version of other people's crap. What you need to do is figure out a way to have the concept, but revolve it around Diana. But these writers aren't creative enough to do that. By the way, what's up, Luffy? And how you doing? Superman being stuck with boring ass Lois is 100% killing his character. Seriously, what does she even do? Annoy people. That's what she does. And by the way, I've been saying for years that I love Clark move the heck out of Metropolis, become a scientist, or none of boring ass reports, an outdated job. Well, here's on that, Luffy. And Britt and I have said this. What they could have done is make him like a traveling journalist, because most people nowadays have blogs. They don't really watch the news. So or read a newspaper or online news or anything like that. So just do that instead of like make it where, oh no, he works at this dying newspaper.
Exactly. It's like everyone has their phones, their pads, and it's like news is right there at your reach. You do have bloggers, you do have journalists, but they are mostly on social media. So why is he stuck at the Daily Planet building? That really just doesn't make sense. Sure, we have it in some stories, and you can as his like um his home base, quote unquote, or work base, but he really should be more global.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that to work. But back to Diana,
Mm-hmm.
what made her unique was that, especially in Perez run, he emphasized on motherhood and mother-daughter dynamics. That's something that you don't have in DC um, stories, or no other characters, because it's all about dead fathers, or that father dynamic. Bruce has Alfred, but he's trying to live up to or thinking about Thomas. um you have Clark with Jor-El and Jonathan. The only reason why I would say Laura really started getting attention was because of New 52. And even Martha, she's kind of in the background. Sometimes she's equal to Jonathan, but most of the time she's not. She's just the sweet, old lady who bakes pies.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I mean, that's what Tomasi does, and he complained about with Diana. Oh, I can't just put her in the background, and I'm like, so you're telling me
well,
you were doing that?
well, no shit, Sherlock. That's
Mm-hmm.
not the point of her character. You can never put Diana in the background because she is a main character and she is her own hero. She is independent. So you prefer, I mean, that's pretty much a swipe and a shade on Lois, is because you feel like, oh, I prefer Lois because I can put her in the background, which he essentially did, with the not even truly showing her as a mother to John. You just have like rare moments, but she really didn't have that perspective as a mother. So with Diana, with Perez, it was Hippolyta and later on Philippus. Then you have Julia and Vanessa as Diana's, little sister. So you had this, um, like I said, this female empowerment, this motherhood, and that was unique to her and
Mhm.
what her story was about. Yes, you did have Steve, but he played the big brother father figure role, and he still was very much important to the story because his connection was still his mother, Diana Rockwell. So again, it still centered around motherhood. And you also had Etta, and then Clark came in, Donna, you know, but still the central part of the story was mothers and daughters. And
Mhm.
that is why Perez Perez's run continues, or has continued to be the golden standard for Wonder Woman. Um, as much as some fans, on Twitter want to boast about Rucka, but Rucka has not emphasized on motherhood. He honestly, the only thing that he cares for Diana is this trying to have her as this political figure, this Paris Hilton Disney princess type personality, and that's really shallow. Um, and also try to bait with shipping. Um,
Mhm.
you know, and it's
Because
not.
again, the man's a spiritual lesbian, so you're a straight guy. That's the part that always confused me. He says, I'm a lesbian. So am I if we're going by that definition.
I have no idea what that means, and I really like. I think that he would try to make it seem like it's a positive thing, but in all seriousness, yes, it is him just basically saying he's straight. He's a straight guy, and honestly, that is an insult. So, to
Can
make
I
it,
call that cultural appropriation?
no, Gary,
All
no,
right, all
no,
right,
no,
all
no,
right.
no. Mm-mm. Um, yeah. So that whole thing is that's a whole nother subject matter. But yeah, with Wonder Woman's runs, as I said earlier, she has a lot of writers who just want to make their mark, to say that they made her better, or in Tom King's sense, challenge, the golden standard, which obviously he has ultimately failed 10
Yeah,
times over.
it's like him trying to challenge that's like that. The way I explain it, Britt, it's like the most beta male ever. Like the skinny dude walks up to like Roman Reigns from WWE and tries to pick a fight with him. That's what it seems like, and it's happening. And the result is just what you would think.
Exactly. It's very embarrassing.
It's very embarrassing. Yeah. So then we get to the stability versus experimentation because, yeah, Barry and Iris are like that classic established couple, and Superman and Wonder Woman, will admit it, was a experiment, or was like a they didn't know if it was going to work experiment when they did it in New 52. Even DC will tell you they had no idea that book was going to do as well as it did. Now, when it did perform well, DC kept it going for a while, but then it's like they wanted to not have money and then just abandoned it. But the point is, it's like Superman and Wonder Woman. Here's the other thing that these two couples actually represent pretty well is like with Barry and Iris, you have a good example of, okay, just keeping it to the status quo and everything's fine. Superman and Wonder Woman have the example of challenging the status quo and the success that you can also get with that.
Right. But DC doesn't want to challenge the status quo because it's too much of effort.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's because they keep the writers on board and assign them to the book when these writers, it's like Tomasi being on Superman and Wonder Woman was about the worst thing you could have done, almost on the level of Tom King writing Wonder Woman.
I mean, yeah, because you have these writers who don't care for Diana. They want to change her. They want to challenge, her as what's been established for her.
Or
So
it's the example of the creators that are so stuck on post-crisis him being with Lois that they don't want to see anything else. Whereas, and the interesting thing, again, Britt and I have an excellent example of a writer that more or less falls in on that, Jeremy Adams. But the difference is he said, I'm still going to try and write the best representation of this relationship that I can. And I'm like, that's called maturity. You won't try and tank the book.
right, I mean, with that's because I think that Adams has an interest in the characters. You know, he has a respect for the characters. For Tomasi, he didn't have respect for Diana. And he even said that in an interview. As like he didn't understand her, he wasn't interested in her. So, you know, that was pretty much it. It wasn't until he had to go back and read, or so he claimed, some stories to get her when he was, put on the Superman and Wonder Woman book. And then with King, it's the same thing with him. It's, he knows that George Perez is the golden standard. He, wants to self-insert as Steve, and he knows what George Perez did to Steve, which is aged him up and have him as that, older figure instead of a love interest. And that essentially what King is trying to challenge is that no, Steve does work as a love interest. And he's also inspired by DCEU, and well, that was Rebirth. But the thing is with that, if you don't have writers who care for Diana first and foremost, the story isn't going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
And to see that these writers are getting very bold, even to, show their frustration and show their disliking of her, is very telling.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get to like the editorial and writers analysis, because again, you have the editors, the editors support Barry Iris, but they don't support Superman and Wonder Woman for nostalgic reasons. It's really nostalgic reasons at this point.
Well, yeah, we've figured that out a long time ago, that DC's problem overall is nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like with a lot of these, like and that's the problem with like a lot of these couples, and it's like it's because the other thing that I heard of is like they were like, the reason why the old creators didn't like the new 52 is because it was changing stuff, and it was also interrupting the stories that they were telling. And I'm like, tough. You work for a corporation. You are at the will of the corporation. If the corporation tells you to reset and drop your story, I'm sorry, tough. That's the way it happens. How do you think the Death of Superman crew felt when the show was going to do the marriage of Lois and Superman, but before they did, so they had to abandon their storyline for how it was going to happen? But it's like, no, they were accepting of that.
I mean, when you know that your story, okay, I don't think that it was just because the stories were interrupted. I think because you know that your story was interrupted and sales were in the gutter. But that
It's
is
pride,
the
in other
thing.
words.
Yeah. And I think that is, well, I know that is what they like to ignore, is sales. So bringing that up to people who claim, yes, New 52 had, awful decisions. We know that. But ultimately, it was to save the company from, being shut down. And it worked, for what it was. But, even now with the Absolute Verse, the only thing that's really just keeping DC afloat and everything is the fact that Absolute Batman is selling 300K um an issue, and also has like over 80 variant covers every issue. Every other Absolute book is probably about 125K, maybe 150K,
Mm-hmm.
but it's dwindling down, you know. Um, and it just shows that, I mean, I would say that Absolute Verse, it has the aesthetics, the unique aesthetics, but the story itself isn't all that unique. So I just feel like a lot of the fans just want something aesthetically pleasing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And what the main line is doing is just being too safe. I would say that Absolute Batman is like this hardcore, as I say, hardcore Frank Miller, um,
Michael Bay.
and Michael Bay, having a son. That's basically what it is. Um, but Wonder Woman, as Kelly has expressed, her inspirations were Rucka. That's pretty much why we have the Rebirth supporting cast. Uh, and you have Diana, as her aesthetic was supposed to be the Princess of Hell, but she has that princess, Disney princess, this um, happy-go-lucky, in a sense, type vibe to her, this nice girl vibe to her. And she wins a lot. She doesn't really, even if it is some conflict, it's resolved quickly. And then Superman is just, I mean, it's very middle road, whatever. But I think that still it's not so much as the story, but because it's better than the main verse.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the interesting thing. It's like I was watching a tweet. Someone was talking about the absolute universe and they go, it's amazing how the absolute universe gets glazed, even though it's exactly what DC fans told me they didn't want back like for years. And I'm like, well, it's because it's an alternate universe and stuff. So that's the advantage that it has. But the other thing is like, no, but these people have said it should never exist, period. So I'm like, pick one.
Yeah, but it's a lot of contradictions, a lot of flip-flopping, you know.
Well, DC families flip flopping. Please say it ain't so. But Barry Allen and Iris are also treated. It's, again, most of the couples that Britt and I talk about are the ones that DC like accepts and will not like mess with forever, as opposed to like Super Wonder. Even though, hey, maybe you could actually like screw with this one with like the Lois and Superman one. Why is that one exempt from all changes?
I think because, you know, if you do disrupt a certain thing or give them conflict, they don't know how to write conflict with Lois and Clark. With the Superman 2025 movie, um, that was it was pretty much them having an argument, and it wasn't truly resolved in a way of, you know, I would say truly understanding each other. They really didn't have that deep conversation of who they are and, you know, about the relationship, about, their different views. It was very surface level, and Gunn talked about music. It wasn't about them. It was just about to have his, line about the punk rock and stuff like that. And then at the end, he wanted to have that, Superman and Lois are together. But it's never a true challenge with them because you have to continue on with that and you have to actually show that this relationship endures. But that truly means that it doesn't endure. When you can't write genuine conflict and you know that it has to have this certain ending of they get back together anyway, or you gloss over certain, conflicts or whatever. Yeah, it's not the relationship to endure. It's just there by default.
Yeah, exactly. And my Cameron says we always go down the we can always go down the you lied to me for controversy, but the problem with that is that whole like argument has been used so many times in superhero movies. Like you lied to me for the secret identity. Stop with the whole oh, you lied to me. You weren't entitled to know.
Yeah, I mean, that it's just that, conflict or whatever is very much overplayed. And it's there's boundaries in a relationship. No, the way Clark had a double life, and he even in post crisis, he didn't tell Lois his, secret identity until they were engaged. Really didn't make sense because if you are at that point of an engagement, yes, you should. First of all, it didn't make sense that she didn't even know because you're engaged. Like you didn't
Mhm.
know that he was going out in spandex flying around, or whatever. That's that does not make sense to me.
Again, Britt, they want to tell me that she is the best journalist.
Right. Um, but if you are to write a relationship correctly, and I mean, you don't want to say that, you know, writers don't experience a relationship, because that's their personal business. However, they write these relationships like they have never actually gone through a relationship. And how things are now that they are very much influenced, by m- media. So by comic books, by movies, of their expectations of real life relationships. You know, yeah, those expectations that they have where Superman is this having this captain save the thought mentality and being, this golden retriever himbo type, character that does not truly exist. And Lois's attitude towards him, being that she want to make it seem like she's a girl boss. And no, that does not work in reality either. So, yeah, the way that, yes, this is fantasy and it's exaggerated of reality. But at the same time, I definitely prefer relationships to be on a serious note. And
Yeah.
if you're going to have conflict, you actually dive into the conflict. You don't need to present it, then gloss over it and say, oh, they are the best couple ever. And I feel like that is pretty much what the Lois and Clark relationship has been, for these decades of glossing over conflict, not giving them conflict. And also, even with saying that they never have conflict and so that makes them healthy by default is a lie. Because you are a relationship has to go through something. It's not going to be happy go lucky 24/7.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's just unrealistic. It's really lazy. And it's just them being afraid to show the cracks in that relationship.
Yeah, exactly. So then we go to the writer's approach. Again, it's heavily depend on the writer. So you have writers like Charles Sewell, who is the god when it comes to Superman and Wonder Woman writing. Let's face it. Then you have I picked for Francis Manapul because he was the Flash writer in the new 52, at least the first thing, and like really fleshed out post-crisis post-crisis new 52 Flash. And I really feel like both of these writers really exemplify what you basically say there, Britt.
Yeah, I would say so. I did not read New 52 Flash, but his artwork was amazing though.
Hmm.
I did, see a few panels and everything. So yeah, if that was how the relationship was, then I take your word. Um, but with Sewell, given his background, he understands a relationship, um, and the whole premise of immigrants.
Hmm.
That the fact that he respected that and really put his personal perspective in that really shows his professionalism and
Hmm.
why he was the best writer, you know, in a sense, if they were to let it last, which it could have, which under Sewell, as I said, it was the best writer for that. Um, I will also say even Perez,
Hmm.
the way Perez presented their relationship and how the relationship pretty much always should be is first from Diana's perspective and how because she's younger than Clark, even if fans try to say otherwise, she is younger than him. Two, well, in post crisis, I think they were about 10 to 15 years apart.
Oh, geez.
Um, yeah, Diana was fairly young. She was, yeah, she was 19 and Clark was like, I know he was either late 20s or almost 30 though,
Hmm.
I think. Um, but but yeah, she's younger than him. And that is her first experience of someone who not only is in the superhero community, but also in, man's world. And he's actually lived within man's world. So he can give her both of those perspectives and understand her, in both ways of her trying to integrate within man's world and also integrate within the superhero community. Or they can, integrate together within the superhero community if he is about 2 or 4 years older, whichever way you want to go.
Yeah,
But it
exactly.
is always of Diana's perspective, her feelings, because she is, you know, romantic feelings. Diana's love is universal, and it doesn't really.
It doesn't mean she literally loves every single person on Earth. I know some people think
I mean,
that.
not romantic love. It's
Yeah.
is is her love is shown differently. Um, it you know she basically embodies the different types of love, and of course, you are going to be categorized the individual within those placements of her love, but to show that she genuinely had that sort of, first butterflies, first type of recognition of that romantic feeling, it was with Clark. And that was something, coming of age, and it was very, realistic to a a young girl of her age.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, DC has had writers who understood Wonder Woman, but they always managed to screw them over. Perez, he
Hmm.
couldn't finish truly telling his story, especially after War of the Gods. He just and how editorial screwed that, War of the Gods up. And even with Clark and Diana's relationship, um, because Superman editorial, I think they felt like, again, because it's of the female character's perspective, you know, they can't have that because they are so male, it's a male dominant field already. So having Superman as the or now the second biggest, male character behind the biggest female character, they just no, that's not happening.
Yeah, it's like when Didio was upset that Wonder Woman the movie was doing so well. I'm like, what difference does it make? Anyway, so then we get to fan reception. Again, it's very similar to the writing perception because again, the fans are more supportive of Barry and Iris because it's more air quote classic because apparently comic book fans don't like anything new. And then with Superman, Wonder Woman, it's more popular than Twitter will make you think. It's sad that some fans don't feel safe enough to like speak out about this, which is the reason this show exists.
I mean, first of all, not feeling safe on the internet. I would think that, maybe with um I don't, scammers or something like that. But in fandom of fictional characters, yeah, that should not be. I mean, to get death threats or get thrown slurs and everything like that because of fictional characters, you definitely need to go touch grass. Go outside, go touch grass, go take a long drive, something like that. Um, Hell, even try to jump to the moon. I don't know. But either way, you need to get off the internet if you are doing something like that. Um, but you also have this whole thing, and maybe it was because of COVID and how people, were at home and they really just became obsessed. And so you have this parasocial world now where, people are so obsessed and attached to internet things. Um, but within that, the fandom has become cult-like, where if you don't worship or praise this certain thing, then you're basically out the cult. You and you are a demon from hell too. You know, uh, again, for fiction, paper people, made up things, that's pretty much in your head. That's too much, and that should not be.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get to, and by the way, that's the reason why the show exists. So then you get to the key thematic contrast. So Britt, talk to us about the thematic contrast.
Okay, so basically, Superman and Wonder Woman is basically asking, these would be gods, but they're not really gods. These immortal beings, can they have love? Can they fall in love? And what does that mean for the world? And how can, if they pursue a relationship or, things like that, what sort of perspective do they bring to each other? Do they, what perspective do they bring to the world? So it's really just this, philosophical and um, eternal, or maybe external, pressure that they both feel, and really realizing who they are as a whole, as people. And then with Barry and Iris, is basically what keeps a hero human. As far as Barry goes, it is Iris, because she has been there truly with Barry and the Flash from day one. She knows Barry, she knows. Um, I was going to bring up actually the show, but that was a little bit awkward given that it was kind of written that they were, was it like step
Oh
siblings?
yeah. Okay, so here's what happened. It's like, and the fan base knows it's creepy because they'll go, we don't talk about that. So so after the whole thing with Barry's father getting framed for killing his wife, and by the way, Lord Zed has the greatest comment ever. And I feel like I'm early. Has DC released the death of Lois Lane yet? One day, my friend, one day. So it's like with Barry. So the show writes it where Iris's father Joe raises him. So and they start off as kids together. So essentially, she's his stepsister.
So I mean,
I'm like, did no one think this through? No, the answer is no. This is the CW after all.
yeah, the CW has some very questionable choices, but I mean, they can grow up together, kind of like, well, they didn't live together, so I can't really even say that. You know, Hal and Carol, they
Mhm.
you can honestly, it could have been better done better. You know, with having them separated or so, and then as they grew up, it was just as best friends. But trying to have them kind of as that, him seeing, Iris's dad as like this father figure and things like that, it no, that just does not work. Especially when you know that the end goal is to have them as, a romantic pair. Yes, you can have this platonic love, friends to lovers, best friends to lovers. That is pretty much what um Clark and Diana, Clark and Diana's whole thing is. But it's never going to be them portrayed as step siblings or things like that, and then they end up romantic. That's very much if you watch an anime type you know trope.
Yeah, it very much. And imagine how that feels for Joe attending the wedding of his two kids.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly. By Lord Zed says it could have been worse. People often forget that Zeus and Hera are siblings. They're the most toxic sibling marriage in their canon to DC. It's just even in, I think that's in the Rucker run, but whenever they call each other like sister wife or brother husband, I'm like, could you have left that part out, Rucka?
Rucker has his ways of being very questionable.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So, Britt, tell us about the history of Barry Allen and Iris West. Right, first off, I should mention this. So, at this time, the comic book industry at the time was really struggling post World War II, and people were getting more into like chemistry sets and more scientifically minded people. So, DC was like, okay, so DC looked at their back catalog of characters. This is where you have like Hal Jordan as a Green Lantern being creative. But then with Barry Allen, it was more of, okay, so let's just ground this character, because the way that Jay Garrick originally got his powers, Britt, was inhaling the fumes of hard water. Yep, that's golden age for you. So they were like, how about he just gets bathed in chemicals and struck by lightning? That's better.
I mean, I don't know, talking about hard water. I'm sorry, but that just like, so you're talking about ice. Like, what
Yeah,
are you talking about?
exactly. But it's like, I'm like, so that's where you gave him the powers, but they grounded it, and then it's like, here's the funny part: they put so then people are like, where's Jay Garrick and like Alan Scott and all the Golden Age characters? They're like, oh, don't worry, that's on Earth too. But in DC Comics is like, but didn't tell anyone that the multiverse existed until Flash 123.
Oh, interesting.
But anyway, so begin.
Okay, so we can run through this.
Hmm.
So the relationship started, of course, in the Silver Age from the 1950s, 60s.
Hmm.
Um, they were both, you know, they both debuted together. Um, Iris is a reporter. Barry's main love interest. She's strong-willed, independent for the women of that era. This is a time where they try to be a little bit more um, respectful to women. And I would say that Iris, she definitely was far more humbled in everything than Lois.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, you do have the secret identity thing going on just for a while, but in a sense, it was far more playful,
Hmm.
and it wasn't as antagonistic, as Lois and Clark.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So next slide. Are you there, Britt?
Okay. Well, the slide didn't change.
Hmm.
The slide didn't change.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Okay, so Iris does learn of his identity, and throughout this time, she pretty much has known of his identity. It did not take, decades for this to become a turning point. So their relationship pretty much, went through the steps much faster. You do have, like Aquaman and Mira, you have Hal and Carol, now Barry and Iris, even, well, Bruce and Talia or Bruce and Selena, you do have these established relationships that, within the main verse, that have moved forward for marriage or that secret identities just weren't a thing.
Hmm. Yeah. So continuing on. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so you have the whole marriage thing and why, this is something to, um, of course, set in stone. This is moving Barry's story forward, and again, they're not doing the will they won't they for long. It is just the starting point, but they are having a mature, relationship evolution.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, oh my gosh, but it's like it's more of the natural like progression of their characters, which I love how they always try and make, oh my gosh, they're getting married. And I'm like, so?
Right. I think that, this really shows again how DC has, um in a sense, for Lois and Clark to be, held as this, golden standard or whatever, they really downplayed a lot of these relationships that went forward, you know, far faster and much earlier than that relationship has. And honestly, these relationships feel much more earned, while Lois and Clark still feel like it was by kind of by default, and really, especially with the marriage, because it was a synergy thing with the Dean Cain show. So
Yeah.
it really just feels like it's always a synergy thing, and it's always just out of nostalgia or laziness, or this certain default for them. But Barry and Iris show that no, they actually have this progression, this natural progression. No need for synergy, no need for um, writers needing a gimmick or anything like that. It's just their relationship taking the natural steps.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get to the 70s and 80s.
So, of course, you do have to have people dying.
Hmm.
You wouldn't have comic stories if people weren't dying. So, Iris was murdered by Reverse Flash. This is very having this emotional turning point. He does become a little bit darker, he's brooding, and grieving and everything like that. Um, but it is, I mean, they died young, you know, um, so they don't really have that happy ending. And you don't know if Iris is going to come back.
Hmm.
And then you have Barry dying in crisis. So yeah,
Hmm.
their story is not a happy ending. It is something that ends tragically.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to his return.
So here we go with, of course, DC, especially with Jeff Johns, to having this nostalgic, fanboyism with the Silver Age. So they bring back Barry, and he isn't the main Flash truly, but they start to rebuild him as becoming the main Flash, and also his relationship, of course, as the core is Iris.
Yeah. So what happens, by the way, so he comes back in the main universe because it was revealed he wasn't dead. He was just like sent back to the Speed Force in Crisis. So he reemerges when Darkseid is taken over in Final Crisis, and it's like they go to Wally and Barry go to Iris's home. And then they find her there watching TV, and it's like because the anti-life equation was put on TV. So to snap her out of it, Barry super kisses her.
So that's basically the reverse of Reeve kissing Lois and she lost her memory.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Flash
exactly.
basically, so Flash kissed her so she can regain her memory. Oh, that's
Yeah,
a cool little.
and it's better here because it's like this is the first time she has seen him since he died.
Well, that's sweet.
Yeah, so that's what Final Crisis like really did, and it basically again it showed that she is his lightning rod. I really like that. So then you get to New 52, Barry screwing up the timeline.
So with that, Barry tried to save his mother. He is, basically a mama's boy. So he is going to sacrifice everything for his mother, which was on our side a good thing because no marriages, meaning that, the close marriage was wiped away.
But you could have done
Um,
it in a way where like Barry was still dating Iris. There's a difference there.
I think that they still wanted to have the gimmick of everything is new,
Mm,
and honestly, they wanted to try different directions before gradually going back to the same old, same old. They just
mm-hmm,
wanted to experiment, which is fine. Um, yes, the execution was terrible, but at least you tried.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, Barry is also blamed for DC having in a meta way for DC having to have this reboot and have number ones and everyone is young again, but it was a necessary thing.
Yeah, oh, it saved the company again. Everyone talks about how bad New 52 is, but DC Comics would not be here without it. So then you get to Rebirth.
So Rebirth, well, this is where the nostalgia truly kicks in, and DC is trying to backpedal from New 52. They're trying to bring back that whole. It's like they're trying to bring back the essence of post crisis, but not post crisis as its true self. So they really are basing things off of nostalgia and, oh, do you remember this? Or
Mm-hmm,
this actually happened, this didn't happen, but or it didn't happen as you read it before.
mm-hmm.
But they do end up being together again, and their status is they're quote unquote married. I don't no, they're not officially married, I don't think, but it's kind of like they are if
Yeah,
you read Post
exactly.
Crisis.
Well, yeah, exactly. But and this was one of the bringing back one of the restorations I was not against. Hey, what's up, Randy? It's because it's like I like this relationship, so I'm like, okay, this is fine. And it wasn't exactly crapping on something that the fan base was pretty on board with because it wasn't like you had this massive like Barry Allen and Patty Spivot book that was doing well. You really didn't. So it's not like with Superman and Wonder Woman where like they took away a very successful book in favor of a stale relationship.
Right. I mean, it would have been better, or we would have understood if the Convergence mini would have done better in sales if
Mm-hmm.
the Superman books and Wonder Woman was doing better. But no, if you go back to the sales numbers and everything, it pretty much did not matter. Um, and yeah, even with the Trinity Rebirth book, Superman and Wonder Woman still outsold it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. They're also even super sons. So there's that. So, fun fact: Barry likes Superman to be with Wonder Woman.
Yeah, so we can thank Barry for maybe this is pre-crisis Barry who did Flashpoint, and that is why we have Clark and Diana together in New 52. But on the serious note, yeah, so this is from Justice of America 69, and this is Diana in her mod era, um, powerless. She um leaves the Justice League, she's very dramatic. And Barry basically says that, you know, he thought that for the longest time, Clark and Diana were going to get married. He has Iris, Aquaman has Mira, everyone has their significant other, but Clark and Diana are single, obviously.
Mhm.
And we also have that hint of, yeah, it might have been something more to their relationship to the point of the league even seeing it. And now that Diana is leaving the league, Clark and Diana can't be together. So Barry was basically rooting for them. And yeah, he was hoping that it would be Super Wonder wedding bells in the future.
Oh hell yeah! And so let's analyze the crap out of this.
Yeah, so with this, again, I would say that in the Justice League of America book, a lot of times Diana is treated very poorly. And it is Clark who is her support. He is the voice of reason, but he is the one who also tells the league to back off of Diana a lot of times, and he is there to support her through, this era. It was another story where I think she basically had like this emotional breakdown, and he was there for her. So you do see a lot of the romantic hints for Clark and Diana. And again, at that time, just like with continuity, with him being, the narrator for um, the history of DC, at this time he was that sort of voice for the Justice League. Barry was.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And oh, by the way, Randy brings a good point. Hey, everyone, I found out something really crazy. Apparently, some people can like different things. Some people prefer Superman and Wonder Woman. Some people over Lois and Clark. Clark, isn't that crazy? I know, right? But again, with Twitter, it has to be a very culty behavior. Anyway, why does this matter? Why does this matter historically, Britt?
So obviously, it tells that Superman and Wonder Woman did not start in the 52. They do
They
have
definitely didn't.
they do have history that predates to post pre-crisis. Whether it is hints, teases, or whatever, it is there. And honestly, it shows that at the time, it was a serious thing, even to bring up to say that, maybe they'll get married at some point. That shows how it was a serious, creative conversation for the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get to the conclusion of this because, like, yeah, honestly, pretty decent couple. I like it. And it also, again, it demonstrates the many ways that DC really has to, like, pick up the slack when it comes to Lois. Because I'm sorry, it's like if you have characters like this that are basically like, I hesitate to call Iris Lois Light, but it's more like a better well, she's the improvement. More like Lois is Iris Westlight, because Iris is the one that really represents that you can do that whole superhero and a civilian identity thing And the fact that she's a journalist and he's a superhero is even more hilarious, Britt. It's really funny how much of an anti-Chloe Barry and Iris really is.
I mean, the whole point, I think, is Iris is a Lois light, but the thing is, because being the reporter and everything, that is basically the foundation of being um, a civilian love interest. Is you have to be even stuck in the military, things like that. Um, and as a reporter, I guess that's by default because the hero is within the action and stuff, and the reporter is being the media and having that sort of perspective for the hero. But it's really because Iris is not put in the forefront as like trying to justify her relevance.
Mm-hmm.
She's not being put up against other female characters to um to show that she's better for Barry, or she's not, given powers to understand Barry. Things like that. The annoying thing about Lois is not within Iris. You just have her as her role, which is the love interest, and whether they want to have a story that really shows her perspective, or they naturally show her as this lead character. But for Lois, it just feels like DC is pretty much forcing her relevance and forcing her to be more prominent because of not knowing what else to do with her. And that's just not fair to her character if you want to big her up as this, prominent female character.
Yeah. Exactly, 100%. And then because a great character can stand on her own, she doesn't need to constantly be compared to other people.
Exactly.
So let's go to our crossover story. Now, even though this is this is a comparison of two DC couples, I can actually say this. A portal / crack opens.
Yes, it does open because we are time traveling, or, well, within the multiverse. We
Mhm.
are, um, so within this is sort of a, it is kind of a inspiration from Shelterverse, but it's also Justice League 69 and also Sacrifice.
Mhm.
So,
Only well
um,
done, right?
of course. So, it's a multiverse epic that is narrated by Barry. Um, the
Works.
plot, the plot overview is basically on the eve of his wedding to Iris West, Barry he should be, ready. Also, Tomorrowverse. I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
So he is thinking about his friends, Clark and Diana, because they he sees his love for Iris, and he's just in this very loving mood. That everyone should be happy, everyone should be in love or loved. And for Clark and Diana, him seeing them, almost every day being, flirtatious or whatever, but they get cold feet, is just unfair.
Mhm.
So, the core themes of this is basically truth versus perception, um, love across timelines. So it's basically showing the different ways or the different types of love being um, explored with Clark and Diana's relationship, because it is a multifaceted relationship where you can just have them as friends and maybe they're just, well, they're friends with benefits, or they're just friends. They do end up being a couple, or you have a story where they are like Kingdom Come, or Tomorrowverse, Earth 2 versions of them, where they get together later in life, you know. So this is destiny versus hesitation. And what that means is that this is a, um, a relationship that is meant to be, but you are hesitant to cross that, boundary, take that next step. And then you have the public judgment or the versus the personal identity. And we see that in Superman and Wonder Woman, of course, with Soul, with the world judging Clark and Diana already as individuals, but how will they judge them and have these expectations of them being together? And then that whole personal thing of Clark battling with his identity, Diana wanting to celebrate her culture, but feel like she has to hold back a little bit because the world is not ready for that. And then you have this emotional, um, this it's just a whole roller coaster, of emotions of their work, their duty, and also trying to have time and balance out the love that they have for each other.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get to the fracture.
So basically, Wonder Woman, I whatever you want her to do, whether it is to call back to Max Lord or um, even do the Sovereign story better, and she is now public basically anything that makes Diana public enemy number one. So it does result in some civilian casualties. It wasn't her fault, of course, we know that, but the world just feels like, she being who she is as the perception of the Amazons being as warrior women, that is what the world sees now. They see Diana as reckless, as this warrior woman. And that is also meta commentary for how, we see people on that bird app called Diana saying that she's just this warrior woman, which we know that she isn't. Um, so the Justice League is fractured because some, of course, are on Diana's side, others are in the middle, and others are against her. And it's basically Batman, of course, because being a paranoid a-hole, and he feels like, you need to take time to let this blow over and let us investigate this, follow protocols. Clark, again, is always going to be on her side, just as he was in pre-crisis, where it's like he trusts Diana and he's going to speak up for her. And Barry also, because he knows that Diana, is the heart of the league. She, whatever decisions that she makes, it is not something that was done with the intention of anyone getting hurt. She would never um, put any civilians in jeopardy. So, out of respect and just Diana's integrity, she does decide to resign on her own. Um, kind of, yeah, it is a little bit of pressure, but she still does not fight. She feels like, yeah, maybe it is time for me to go back to Themyscira for a while because basically Man's World is a dump anyway, and she's just heartbroken.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on to next slide.
So Barry, of course, investigates all of this. He is kind of like something isn't right. It just feels like he's seen this before and you know, is something that could have been prevented. So with this, we find out, of course, he goes to Clark and he knows that Clark is going to try to fight for Diana. So with that, they figure out that it is the Duke of Deception. So in that, he is twisting the truth. Um, he's having people basically turn on Wonder Woman. The love that the public has for her is now the hatred.
Yeah, exactly.
And with
I like that.
and also with the league, of course, they are supposed to be together on all of this, but now there's a divide because Wonder Woman's gone.
So then the multiversal run.
So Barry basically says we have to, fix this, but it's not just that we have to show that this is what actually happened, and not only that, but also prevent it in a way of getting there. I don't know, even a minute before what occurs happened. So Clark, of course, goes to Themyscira. He's talking to Diana and he's telling her, what Barry has figured out and we can change this. Um, with that, it is a question of like the future that you're messing with the past, the future, what happens to the future, but it's like that doesn't matter because without you in, Clark's future, there's no I wouldn't say there's no future for him because he's not codependent. But of course, you have to have it in that romantic sense of he just wants to have his best friend, partner, and the woman he loves back.
Exactly. And then the multiverse.
So within this, you are going through different worlds, different timelines, continuities, and just like in the Kingdom, when you have Hyperman
Hmm.
show, you know, Clark, Clark and Diana, and Batman, and also the Kingdom Come version. That is vast
Hmm.
worlds and hyper time and everything like that. So in the first world is the beginning. You have young Clark and Diana. This is basically New 52 world where they are flirting, they are happy, and well, I would also say this is a mix maybe of early post crisis too with Perez. Earth 2, um, this world is Clark and Diana fighting side by side, but it is a lot of war. It's a lot of darkness, and it's a little bit more. Um, the world is far more realistic, and they don't trust easily with the heroes. But Clark and Diana are side by side, fighting together. World 3 is they never got to tell each other how they feel, you know. And maybe at some point they either one of them die or is just or they become distant because of, you know, the world's pressure and they become more antagonistic towards each other and it just doesn't feel right when you have Clark and Diana not um as the best friends that we know of them, and they're so distant. And that's basically, of course, meta commentary on their current status quo in, comics now. Earth,
Yeah, exactly.
World 4 is what could be, which is them having a family together. In this world of seeing that future, it makes them uncomfortable in a good way because it's like, or I wouldn't say uncomfortable. Basically, they have those butterflies and that nervousness because they know that that's what they want, and but it's something that it feels like is so hard to reach.
Awesome. So then we get to Barry's realization.
So Barry basically says, throughout all of these Earths, at some point you're either together or even if you aren't romantically linked, you're bound together at somehow because it just shows how, as I said earlier, multifaceted Clark and Diana's relationship is and how you can explore these different versions of their relationship without distancing them or just making it antagonistic and conflicting, in a contrived way.
Exactly. In other words, not DC Rebirth.
Right. So they track Duke of Deception at the moment where, the tragedy strikes. It is a battle basically of perception and of um, kind of like a mental thing more so than a physical fight. Of course, the illusions are now, or that he's presenting is distorting reality. Civilians they are seeing the heroes as monsters, as enemies. You have trust now, gone. So of course you have Diana as the spirit of truth. She uses the lasso, and she shows the of course she shows the truth. She wraps the Duke into the lasso and, says the whole speech and everything. Um, and the illusion shatters. So Diana she did save the lives, but it was the Duke who, warped it into that illusion to say that those people, died at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get to the world is restored.
So now you have a public celebration, but also an apology from everyone. Diana is back in a sense, not on the lead because she doesn't trust them. She's kind of pissed off at them, but that, some of them weren't on her side. But she is back to being Wonder Woman. Um, I would say maybe you do have a press conference held, but she it, she basically is taking time for herself still, and it's not that worldly expectation, because you see that the world will turn against you, and she's not going to be so, open in that sense. She needs time to heal. And that is also a meta commentary on the way Tom King executed, that Wonder Woman arc of her being a fugitive. We really didn't see Diana's that toll that it took on her, and how her perspective changed on the world. That even at that time, you know, she would never lose faith in the world like that. She would never truly just leave the world, but at the same time, she will be more reserved. And
Hmm.
we didn't see, and she will have a different perspective and not try to glorify, America or things like that. She will just have this certain um, perspective of not to be so naive and so open at the moment. She has to trust her instincts a little bit more.
Exactly. So then the confession.
So here we have Barry. Um, well, we have Clark. He goes to Diana, and they have the talk about their relationship, about how they feel about each other, and it's something that what I like about Clark and Diana's relationship is that it's not that they have this long drawn out confession. They don't really need that. It's just something that is. Yes, they will say that they love each other, they will do something like that, but it's just not something that needs a grand gesture. When they are together, if they have, hold hands, if they kiss or something, it's just a natural thing
Hmm.
that shows, that their relationship is progressing to something more. So you have the wedding, and Barry is now completely happy. He sees his friends happy. He sees them flirting again, holding each other's hands and everything like that. And of course, he is already pushing for Clark and Diana to eventually get married.
Yep, exactly. What you can even do is have it where he super speeds in and kind of lightly shoves Clark into Diana.
Yeah, or when Iris, throws the bouquet, he
Oh,
basically runs and have it in Diana's hand already or something like that.
yeah, there you go. That works. I like that one. And then it's like he winks at Clark, and Clark is like, "Oh no." But yeah,
Right.
so great story, Britt. I love it. And is there anything else?
No, no.
Okay, then. So, tell me about Green Lantern.
All right. So we are continuing on with the Starbreaker Supremacy arc. It is focusing on, you know, basically all of the lanterns,
Hmm.
um, and just this big epic emotional roller coaster, um, for everyone. You have this. I forgot the artist's name, but it's very anime-esque.
Hmm.
You know, the colors are very nice. It still has that vibrant color, and you also have Kyle Rayner as the White Lantern,
Hmm.
which wasn't that introduced only in the New 52, or
Mm, I know that the White Lantern entity was in the tail end of post crisis because that was Brightest Day and Blackest Night.
right?
I think. Hang on, I'll look that up right now. But the other interesting thing about this, by the way, last issue ended with all the emotions being drained. The way they got them back is the Amazo android, the Starbreaker thing, the Amazo android that turned good. I told you about that one, and I rallied the lanterns together and got them to unlock their emotions again. The way she got Guy Gardner, she just punched him in the face.
That is funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah, and by this is what I was talking about with Jeremy when I said the lantern entities were behind the source wall of all time. And if you remember in the earlier part of the series, with all of the like people manifesting emotions randomly out of nowhere, that was them calling for help.
right.
But so what else did you think about it?
Yeah. So it's basically again there is
Hmm.
some some
It,
inconsistencies, with continuity because of DC's just, you're basically cherry picking certain things,
mhm.
but it's all right for the story that Jeremy is trying to tell, and he is also trying to make sense of continuity, you know, and everything, and put pieces back together. It's fine. You also have these legacy relationships. Just in a sense, some relationships, it's you have to basically like go with the flow of things because it's not the same as whether it once was, or it, like, just in general, it never was what is presented now. So it's just certain things like that. But overall, I still gave it an 8 out of 10 because it's consistent with just trying to be this epic, lantern, um, lore driven, of celebrating the lantern lore.
And by the way, White Lantern Kyle Rayner was from the New 52.
I thought so. Yeah.
So, all right. Then we get to Storm 7, which I really like this one. This is more of like Storm and all of the Storm gods going to war. So Iron Man shows up at Storm's house, uninvited, and tells her, hey, so we were taking out this Hydra ship and it crash landed in like a bog, and a giant snake ate the dude that has the super soldier in him, so it becomes a super snake. So she has to go and fight it. And then all of the storm gods show up, which was honestly really cool. And Britt, who's the other Avenger that's a storm god?
Thor.
Yeah, Thor shows up, setting up a Thor and Storm conflict, which I really like that. I love how this series is steeped in mythology to the point where you even have the Silver Surfer and Galactus. The art in this is so good. Again, I say this every week. This is pretty much a Wonder Woman run as far as I'm concerned. This is more Wonder Woman than if they did a Power Princess series. And I
Yeah,
give, yeah, good. Mm-hmm.
the thing is with this, again, as I keep saying, the it feels like Storm is so big of a character in how it celebrates these different relationships that that she has, and bringing in these characters that want her support or they know how powerful she is, and that is a celebration of who she is. Um, and it just feels like this is a type of this level of storytelling is what Wonder Woman needs.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's 100%. And I give this storyline a 9 out of 10. So then we get okay. So in the in the Spider-Man Superman book, we got like a backup story that's Wonder Woman teaming up with female Thor. First off, Britt, didn't I say Russell Dauterman would draw the crap out of Wonder Woman?
Yes, you did.
The art is stellar. There's one piece of dialogue that I absolutely hate. So they're talking about like so Wonder Woman's and Jane meet, and then Wonder Woman immediately identifies her as Jane Foster, and then Jane says, "How did you know my name?" And then Wonder Woman says, "The Justice League made a wager. Superman had been convinced the new mysterious Thor is secretly Lois Lane." Ah! It gets worse
Quite
though.
honestly,
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't read this, so I'm glad I didn't. I just think that I don't know. It's certain things that these writers they just want to put Lois in anything of Wonder Woman.
Oh, Britt,
Of
that's not even the worst part of this piece of dialogue.
it, mm,
Here, allow me to continue. I guessed Donna Troy and myself. That would be honestly pretty interesting. Batman refused to guess, just complaining about you stealing Thor's name. So when Jane became Thor in All New All Different Marvel, Jason Aaron was super like what's the word? Was super like petty about it. So he had basically the bad guys in every book like repeat the rhetoric coming from Twitter, like, oh, female Thor, why can't they get why can't a woman get her own identity and stuff? Why does she have to steal Thor's name? So you're telling me Batman cares about that? Guy Gardner is the type to say that. Bruce would probably be like, I don't care. Is she swinging the hammer and on her side? Yeah, fine. There you go. But it's like that combined with the Lois Lane part, I'm like, what?
I don't know. Maybe he didn't know what to write. It was just honestly these stories for me. It just seemed like it was just slapped together.
Yeah, but now the parts I did like about it. So Marvel did this story. I think I told you briefly about it called War of the Realms, and it's basically a storyline where mythology goes against the superheroes. Britt, that sounds an awful lot like something I keep saying DC should do. But so they had that in this. So Aaron retells that storyline, but this is in a world where DC and Marvel characters existed together. So instead of like the Dark Elf, who would really be able to rally such a force? But Darkseid. So it's Darkseid leading the War of the Realms, which I really like that part. But it's like, and again, the Dauterman art, the detail, the magic, everything about it is so good. It's I wish he weren't exclusive to Marvel, because then I would ask DC to poach him. But again, it's like with the whole Lois and then the Jason Aaron basically called Batman one of those anti-woke bros, and I'm like, that's not Batman whatsoever. What are you talking about? So like beyond that, it was pretty average. That's why I gave it a 7 out of 10.
I mean, I would give it lower because it just seems like a waste of something. I don't know, but you would think that Diana would have more, you know? And this just seemed kind of, as I said, thrown together.
Yeah. So then you get to Absolute Wonder Woman, or as Britt calls it, Absolute Bait number 19. Ignoring the clear queer baiting, because that's what these writers can only do. So here's what I liked about it. Like the action. So they're basically confirming my theory that Diana makes other people like her just by being around her. It's because when they created, so Kelly Thompson did confirm that the Zeus origin is not a part of Absolute Wonder Woman. It's just like the gods all contributed. So it's like this is Aphrodite's power, like being a part of her, which I really like. I love the Absolute Aphrodite design. They're basically setting up Veronica kidnaps Cheetah. Well, Barbara, but we know why. And the other part I really liked about this is Zatanna and Diana both bring their loved ones back. Well, actually, it's Zatanna brings back her father through using love, and then Diana is brought back from the darkness with her mother. So I really like that juxtaposition there. And obviously Sherman's art is really good. So what do you think, Britt?
Trying to be nice. Let me see. Yeah, the art is good. Yeah.
That's it. I love that. That
Um,
pause. That was great. I love it.
yeah, I guess the thing about Diana's love, I guess she was trying to, justify why she had everyone as, why everyone, clings on to Diana so quickly, which it does, it makes sense, but it it also questions the is she going to show which relationship is actually genuine, or not? And I mean, when you have the rebirth supporting character, like Steve, he is like overly, he's still a bore, but he is just overly doing,
He even takes part in the ritual now. I'm like, wait, what?
yeah, it's things like that that you're trying to walk on eggshells and make sure everything is perfect and they're good. But it's like, okay, where's the conflict? And again, Diana's conflicts are easily resolved. Also, I don't really care for Diana and Zatanna because it just seems like you're putting them together in a very
Because
superficial
they're
way,
both
witches,
witches. Yeah.
but you don't actually have the foundation and or anything of the serious relationship build. They're not even friends, nothing like
They
that. So
just met, and Zatanna was trying to kill her previously. But
right.
I do love the best part this issue to do is it finally got people to basically admit that I was right when I said that, yeah, writers can want whatever they want with Diana's sexuality, but DC won't let them. Oh, so you mean Jared was right?
Yeah, I just feel like, that could have been handled better, and to know that if she did have her way or something like that, that to have Diana with Zatanna first, it's not a something that will last because you're only basing it on their witches. And then they don't have the foundation even in main continuity. There's only a select few times that Diana and Zatanna have interacted, and people really just base it on Justice League Dark. And honestly,
Which was a pretty good book.
they still aren't best, like the bestest of friends though, even in Post Crisis when Zatanna was kind of, um she knew, they both kind of connected with Diana killing Lord, and then Zatanna, I think, mind wiping Bruce or something like that. And they sort of connected with that sense of doing something that, you know, they wouldn't do but had to do, that sort of sacrifice. But it still was not something that truly say that they are the best of friends. You do have another like one shot in, I think, Wonder Woman Agent of Prince or something, where they have like the Spade as besties. But again, it's not something that they do often. They aren't best friends. So with trying to, again, the whole revisionist thing with Diana and Zatanna, it just doesn't make sense to me. And again, you talk about certain relationships like Diana and Cal being they're just together just because of their powers or because they have the matching uh color uniforms or things like that. But what is it truly that Diana and Zatanna have as
Not
a
that much.
foundation for a relationship?
Well, again,
Besides
the other part that I really don't like is now, because I absolutely wonder when people do fan art of these two, even if it's shippy fan art, it's always Diana's bloodied.
the blood I can't stand. I also don't like that Diana is, yes, she might be tall, but the height fetish thing is kind of annoying. And also the whole thing of her being kind of like masculine in a way. Like
Mhm. In the
she
art, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
bloodied and masculine. And you have the Zatanna or Barbara as like these dainty, feminine, short girl type, characters. I honestly I don't like that, because you're taking away Diana's femininity, and that's part of who she is. Just because she's tall, that doesn't mean she's masculine or, things like that. You have to honor who she is. She was blessed by Aphrodite. She is beautiful. I'm not saying that, if you are kind of like this, um, women who have that body structure is beautiful. I'm just saying that Diana still has that more feminine type, aura and physique about her. And taking that away to emphasize another female character is it's just a total like contradiction of Diana.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
again, turning Diana into this dark character for her to fit into Zatanna's world or any other character within even her own book. I saw a tweet again to say, I hope Zatanna is a mainstay in Wonder Woman's book. First of all, can we please have Wonder Woman's actual supporting cast?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many characters. You could even have Cersei be a mainstay in Wonder Woman's supporting cast, and it would have been better. But stop taking other characters and putting them in the Wonder Woman book for no reason.
Yeah, so yeah, I really don't have much to say about um Absolute Wonder Woman right now. Thompson did say that she would bring in Julia or Vanessa in issue 21 or 22 or something like that, which is, I am looking forward to that, but I just hope that it's not something that's um, underwhelming. Again, I feel like Absolute Wonder Woman is pretty much the best of post crisis, um, mainly Rucka and Rebirth or worst of, I don't know. Um, in
We'll
that
see for
sense,
sure.
but it's very superficial, and it's not just something that, oh my God, this should be the main verse thing for Wonder Woman. Diana isn't a witch. She isn't a princess
No.
from or of hell. She, she doesn't have to be 7 feet tall. She, isn't that masculine, bloody warrior you think she should be. Nothing like that. You know, we need a writer who cares for Diana for who she is in main continuity, um, before trying to elevate Absolute. And I think that is also the thing that I have a problem with is Absolute is again a rehash of some sort for main continuity stories. It's just the aesthetic that has changed. You made the characters darker, or you changed, the way Diana looks. Even her costume. To say that Diana needs that costume in, other media, no, she's unrecognizable. You really wouldn't know that that's Diana if we
I
didn't
mean,
know that's her.
the tiara is the only thing and the DC logo there. But yeah, but it's like she doesn't even have the gauntlets, which I imagine she'll get soon. But it's like That's my complaint. It would have been nicer if like she got more of the stuff faster instead of like, let's say 20 to 30 issues to get all of her Wonder Woman stuff.
I mean, I get again that it is an Elseworlds,
Mm-hmm.
but it just feels like again you don't understand Diana, you know, main continuity Diana, main verse Diana, to even try to compare it or make it seem like Absolute is just the best. When even Thompson was like, she couldn't have Diana as the god of war, goddess of war, as initially thought. She had to go into main continuity to basically find her story, you know. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
I just don't really for now. I don't really see the. It's not hype for me, you know.
That's fine. And the only thing I will say though is, don't judge a book by the fan base. Judge the book just by itself.
Well, judging the book by itself is still a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I know. But it's like, just don't judge it by what the idiots on Twitter are trying to say. Is all I ask.
Hmm.
And then Randy says the absolute universe would be a good opportunity to put Superman and Wonder Woman together. You're not the first person to say that. The problem is, I'm not convinced DC would do it.
Of course not.
Mm,
They no.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh no. But it's like, if like if they do it, like let's say a miracle happens and they do it. First off, people's reaction will be even more hilarious. But but it's like, watch it again. Watch them launch a Superman, Wonder Woman Absolute book, and it ends up being the top selling Absolute book, even more than Absolute Batman.
I mean that is wishful thinking and kind of like a pipe dream. Sorry to say, but
Well, is it more of a pipe dream that the book would exist, or more that it would be like that highly rated?
uh, I mean that it would exist.
Oh, well,
Um,
I know that 100%.
I mean again, Super Wonder had its start in Elseworlds, you know, and having that popularity or the controversy, um, just the attention that it gets. Yeah, DC does not want that. Even if it is good attention and everything like that, they don't want it because it's still the expectation of what Superman and Wonder Woman needs as a relationship. Even if they do try to have absolute versions, together, they would inevitably screw it up. So it's best to honestly hope for at some point DC gives us back when they were best friends.
Yeah, or at least a multiverse ongoing book that deals with that. Probably John Jones says DC scares Super Wonder, but they also know that Super Wonder gets attention. I mean, why would they keep selling merch on it? But anyway,
Right.
I think that's a good place to leave it. So this was a great episode. And so, Britt, do you have any stories you want to tease us with?
So of course we have Shelterverse and or Shelter and Odyssey. I am completed with that the first chapter of Diana's adopted daughter story.
Yay!
I had to figure out my title for it. I went through tons of titles and I did add a little bit more to her daughter's origin, to really tie it all in again to the Amazons and also the Olympians, and why she matters to Diana, why she is important also to the Amazons and the Olympians, and you know, what does it mean for Diana to have a powerless daughter? So it's certain things, and also just the celebration of the um, the motherhood aspect
Mhm.
and the female empowerment, and also I wanted to kind of put it in the perspective of um, put our favorite elements in. So of course you would have Julia and Vanessa involved within this first chapter, and it gives you, or I try to give that Perez sort of feel. Um, yeah. So that first chapter will be up probably Wednesday or Thursday. This coming Wednesday or Thursday. And I just can't wait to go ahead and, release this chapter.
By the way, John Jones is calling you out, saying, Britt, you started a lot of fics, but you still haven't finished them.
Look, I have a lot of ideas, and yeah, they are work in progresses. Um, there are some that will be posted, but for me, it's kind of like, am I ready to post them? Because with these chapters, I like to put in every idea I have. Um, and that is pretty much why they're so long too. And it has to blame the perfectionist in me, but I have to have it perfect for myself before I share them. So
And let me put it this way: as someone that started off as just a fan of your fics, I can tell you, while they take forever to come out, they're always good when they do come out.
yeah, it's always going to be worth it. It's just, yeah. And especially, it also depends on my mood because a lot of the stories know, how I'm feeling, what inspires me to write the certain chapter, write a certain scene too. And I really wanted to convey what I'm also feeling. So, yeah, this is pretty much why this story first chapter is coming out. And yes, I will have more um it following that too.
Hell yeah. And as far as Comics League is, this week I'm releasing a video that's talked about 5 facts of Wonder Woman that Tom King screws up. I know I had to limit it to 5 because of the format of my usual content. And Under Two Capes, we're going to be talking about, is the Bat family getting too big, or does every superhero need a family? Then we're going to be concluding our movie nights with Terminator Dark Fate, and then moving on to the X-Men movies. All right, stay at work, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to General Zod and should be wiped out from the multiverse. Barry Allen, start running. So is the Max About for life. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.